What's going on, everybody? Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. It would not be the start of an NFL season without bringing on our good friend, Ben Fennell. You can find him on Twitter at Ben Fennell _NFL. He is a producer for the NFL on CBS as well as NFL on Prime. Of course, does NFL draft and combine coverage for the NFL Films and NFL Network. Ben, it is awesome to have you back. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Andy. This is the best time of year with all the optimism oozing around the NFL here on the dawn of the season. Time to get into it, though. It's been a long time coming. It feels like football's been away forever, and now it's going to be a blur for the next 22 weeks, and it's so exciting.
It is. What more could you possibly want? And I mean, this week is just such a perfect week. Tonight, of course, we get Chiefs-Ravens, Friday night Packer game, which is a really good game. Even as a non-Packer fan, just Packers-Eagles should be really an epic and fun game. And then Saturday, full slate of college. Sunday, commercial-free football and great Sunday night, Monday night games. It's all back. It's all amazing. And I think even next Thursday's game, you actually have it, right? Next Thursday's game is pretty darn good too. So I just can't wait to dive into all of it.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So excited to see some of these rookies out of the package, new coaches, new schemes, free agents all over the place. Preseason, there's so much expectation, hype. You just want to dive into practice, but the tape is the tape. The regular season is the regular season. It's time to go now. What's out there is what it is, and I cannot wait to dive into it all.
Man, I'm ready to run through a wall already. I can't wait. And that's kind of what I want to have you on today is just kind of go through some of these fun topics and look at this Packers roster, look at this Eagles roster, and just kind of look at some of the excitement, what you're going to be watching for on tape the day after. I want to get into all of that. So let's start with the Packers side of things. I just want to kind of pick your brain and know, what are you most excited about this Packers roster? And then maybe on the flip side, what's something that you're a little bit nervous about or at least want to maybe see play out a little bit more?
Well, offense, I think it's real easy to point to, the huge contract, money man, and Jordan Love in year 2 as a starter with some new backfield mates and Josh Jacobs, the rookie Marshawn Lloyd, all those exciting weapons in their sophomore year. But, Andy, it's got to be the defense. The new scheme, the new voice, the new safety room. I think it's going to look drastically different on defense. You're going to see so much more man coverage. You're going to see some creative pressures. You're going to see a penetrating D-line, which new schemes, new voices, new coaches can also kind of unlock some players' potential. Yeah. So I know while players like veterans like Kenny Clark are adjusting and kind of going through something they have done for 8-9 years and all of a sudden changing drastically. But then young players like Devontae Wyatt, this may be the right scheme for him to be unlocked and unleashed, which sometimes it's just that change of voice, change of scheme, and a player's a completely different guy on the field. So while some of the veterans may be a little slow going to adjust, I'm excited for some of the young players that could be falling right into a perfect fit for themselves.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And it does feel like some of these players were a little bit of a square peg in a round hole in Joe Barry's defense. And I think Rashawn Gary, LVN on the edges, putting their hand in the dirt, just getting after the quarterback more, I think are going to benefit. You mentioned Devontae Wyatt, even I think Carl Brooks, maybe even a little Colby Wooden on the inside, sure, I think are all going to benefit. I think Quay Walker, hopefully being able to just kind of flow to the football a little bit more, maybe not have to do quite as much thinking on the second level. I think the corners, if they're going to play more man coverage, I think Stokes, Valentine, Jair all benefit from that. And then I know he's not somebody that carried over from the Joe Barry defense, but hard to find a safety that I think fits this defense better than Xavier McKinney in free agency, which is, I'm sure, why they went out and spent that money. I think there's going to be a lot of players that fit this defense very, very well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, just mentioned that Quay Walker point. He could have a season very embodying of the way, Devin White had for the Tampa Bay Bucks a few years back, where he had 49 QB pressures. And he was more of an attacking forward guy as opposed to a retreating guy or even a sideline to sideline. It's a great way to tap into these explosive, long, freaky linebackers across the NFL without making them think too much. Just go, blow up a running back, go get that quarterback, spy the quarterback when he gets out of the pocket there. So Quay Walker, another guy where his best season could be right on the dawn of 2024.
And if they can figure that out with him, that'd be a great blueprint for Edgerrin Cooper eventually as he gets back and more integrated in this defense. As somebody who obviously in college played that unique college role where he's just more of an athlete running all of it. If you can find something similar to that in Green Bay, that could potentially unlock 2 big-time linebackers. And I'm really excited to see how they utilize those linebackers. But kind of all the players that we just discussed, I do think there are players that are going to fit much better. Kind of on the flip side, what's maybe something that you're a little bit more nervous about, or at least, again, kind of want to see on film before you're maybe feeling confident about it?
Well, it's easy to be optimistic, and we're hoping for the best. But right in lockstep with what I'm excited about, I'm a little nervous too. That linebacking core is young, inexperienced. Obviously, it's going to be probably a rookie next to Quay Walker in there, maybe Isaiah McDuffie, we'll see. And then the two new safeties behind, Xavier McKinney, Javon Bullard, maybe some Oladapo or, somebody else in there. So it's going to be very new down the middle. So communication is going to be really important, and the way they kind of get lined up, handle motions and checks and things like that. It does make me nervous. There's a lot of optimism and excitement about that group, but you also can't go in without a little bit of nerves and a little bit of trepidation behind it. And because of that, Andy, my big nerves are just weathering September emotions, for better or worse. If this team goes 4-0, don't read the headlines. If this team goes 0-4, don't read the headlines. Don't get over emotional, over dramatic in September, which this team should know considering the way they started last year. And then on the other side of the sideline, the way the Eagles started and finished last year, going 11-0 and then pretty much falling off a cliff. So I'm just nervous about these September emotions, for better or worse. And that can be in the locker room, through the media, the fan base, and we're so excited to get our hands on some sort of storyline and sensationalize it. And I know we're going to do it right after Friday's game. And Saturday, you're going to see those sensationalizing, exciting headlines. I mean, God forbid Jordan Love throws 3 picks or 5 touchdowns. He's going to either be in the Hall of Fame or we're looking for a replacement. So it's just kind of getting through that early September kind of highs and lows.
And this one feels even more so because, again, you have two teams that were trending in totally different directions last year. Week 1 is always wonky in and of itself, and you never know what you're going to get on these first games that, with teams not playing almost any of their players in preseason anymore, is almost like a dress rehearsal right away. And then you have an international game in Brazil. Like, just all of it is just going to be this game.
Week 1's impossible, Andy.
Yes.
I mean, what if you just ran into a buzzsaw week 1? I think back one of those Chargers teams, I think started 0-1. And then won the next 15 with Schottenheimer, or they went 14-2.
14-2.
So it's like sometimes you want to take that first week and really blow it up, and that's who you are. You're a bad tackling team, or you can't get after the quarterback, can't run the ball. But maybe that's just that outlier, or maybe you just ran into that bad matchup or a buzzsaw team out there. So I know we want to kind of sensationalize week 1 and week 2 and define it for the whole year. It's a long season. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
And especially with teams here who the Eagles have 2 new coordinators, the Packers have 1 new coordinator. This is not going to be the best version that we're going to see of the Eagles this year. This is not going to be the best version of the Packers we're going to see this year. There's going to be it's going to be a process and a journey throughout the course of the year. And one of the things I've been saying too is just like, we all want just like, it'd be great if there was just this undefeated season. You kind of need some of those lessons along the way. And I pointed to even that preseason and midweek practice that they had with the Broncos, where the Broncos got after him a little bit in that practice, and they got after him in that game. A lot of guys that aren't even here anymore, so who cares? But I think just the fact that they got punched in the face a little bit, I think it was good to taste that and realize, all right, we still have work to do. And sometimes those lessons through the course of the season, failure is fertilizer sometimes. And I think you really need a couple of those. So maybe it's week 1 and you get it out of your system. Maybe it happens in week 10, but it's probably going to happen at some point. Embrace it, learn from it. And I think this team will. And that's the thing that I really love about this team is it does feel like when their backs are against the wall or when they do get punched in the mouth a little bit, they get even more hungry and they want to come back extra motivated. And we kind of saw that in week 3 against the Ravens, not just in the preseason game, but in that practice as well. So I'm very excited to see the journey of this team, not just, again, those sensationalized reactions after 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's well said.
All right, let's go to the Eagles side of the ball, because I know you're obviously from your past very familiar with this Eagles franchise as well. So I just want to kind of ask you the same questions as we prepare for Packers Eagles. What's something that excites you about the Eagles first, and then we'll get to the flip side?
Well, the scheme change first and foremost, just as much as I'm excited for the Packers defense and Jeff Hafley, the Eagles offense with Kellen Moore coming over, I think is going to look drastically different. I think you're going to see all those motion concepts that have just been oozing throughout the NFL over the past 4 or 5 years, that the Eagles have really elected to go the other way. Excuse me. I think you're going to see more blitz answers for Jalen Hurts. I think you're going to see some more interesting creative concepts, which the Eagles ran a very condensed playbook. It was almost like a high school playbook run by NFL superstars. Yeah. And it wasn't very deep. They ran the same plays kind of over and over in different packages. So I think you're going to see a lot more creativity, a deeper playbook, and a lot of things on tape maybe you haven't noticed through these young superstars and Devontae Smith and Jalen Hurts and Dallas Goedert in their careers, which I'm really excited for that change in the offense. And I think the personnel we're all looking for, Saquon Barkley. in a threatening offense. And I know that's a really weird way to describe it, but that Giants team he was with just wasn't a threatening, imposing offense. Didn't have those weapons on the outside to keep safeties back. Didn't have that gunslinger quarterback to really make defenses worried about, him slicing and dicing you. And we obviously know that average offensive line has been slow coming. It is impressive to watch Andrew Thomas grow and X, Y, and Z. But to see Saquon in an offense with a lot of different ways to beat you, that's an exciting proposition. Now, is Saquon a bell cow back that's going to dominate between the tackles like Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor? I don't think so. But I think he's a versatile, explosive playmaker that I want to use a little bit more like Alvin Kamara, Aaron Jones, Christian McCaffrey, because he can catch the ball well. He can do a lot of things in space. But I don't necessarily love him, just lowering his pads and being a 30, carry guy between the tackles and a cloud of dust. So it'll be interesting to see how the Eagles want to use him because, they still want to commit to running the ball. That's going to be their identity, their bread and butter. I know no more Jason Kelsey up there, but their offensive line is still their strong suit and still their kind of armor to the offense. So I'm excited to see Saquon and just Jalen Hurts in this new scheme. I think it's going to look very different. Conversely, on the other side of the Packers defense. So 2 new schemes out there at the same time. Should be fun to watch.
Yeah. And speaking of those running backs, the Packers and the Eagles were the 2 teams that went out and spent big money for those running backs. Obviously, there were a couple others as well. Tony Pollard got a good deal. Derrick Henry. Yep. So, but overall, you look at Saquon and Josh Jacobs and sort of similar story with Jacobs too, right? Like those Raiders offense, especially as of late, weren't always the most dynamic, didn't have the quarterbacks, a lot of loaded boxes. So what he looks like in this Packers offense and what Saquon looks like in the Eagles offense, I think both of those are going to be immensely intriguing. And then my other one was just Jalen Carter. I think he's going to take another big step in year 2. And I'm very interested to see the matchups. My guess is we're going to see Sean Ryan at right guard. Maybe we see a sprinkling of Jordan Morgan, but how Jalen Carter goes up against Sean Ryan, Josh Myers. And then if we get some Elton Jenkins versus Jalen Carter, I think that'll be a lot of fun too. So that's my, what I'm excited about from an Eagles standpoint. What maybe gives you a little bit of reason for concern for the Eagles?
I'm glad you mentioned Jalen Carter. I actually tweeted about a month ago saying how excited I am for high profile sophomores to play.
Yep.
And that was entirely thinking about Jalen Carter. As I was sitting there watching practice one day thinking, no one's really talking about Jalen Carter. This guy dominated the league the first 2.5 months. Obviously fell off when the team did, but that's the perfect scenario for a superstar defensive player where there's not a lot of attention and he's just going to come out and remind everyone the type of player he is. So I'm excited for high-level sophomores to maybe do all their work behind the scenes and not have as much attention on them. But what makes me nervous, I think the offensive line's still the lifeblood, but there's a little bit of a shakeup this year. We have Cam Jurgens over to center. That means Mekhi Becton looks like he's going to be the right guard, traditionally a tackle in his career. So how that transition goes, in addition to them all working together, I think is a worrisome proposition for the offense. But I think it's all going to come together in the new scheme and kind of they're all going to, burn it down and rise it up together. So I hope they're all in lockstep with Kellen Moore's new offense. And then just some of the parts, some of these new players, the linebacking core is new, which was supposed to be Zach Bond, Devin White. Devin White not making the trip now, so it seems like it'll be Nakobe Dean in there. Yep. And then Bryce Huff, the undersized edge rusher they got from the Jets. Who is Bryce Huff, the full-time player?
Yep.
The Eagles are going to make him a full-time player. We haven't really seen that with his time with the Jets. He's a little undersized, but is a pass-rushing demon. Can he be an elite run defender? He could be. He just hasn't been given that opportunity. So it's interesting to see, does he play more snaps against the run? Does that make his pass rush take a step back? Or does he get absolutely worked in the run game and you realize he's a liability on first down and he's just a pass rushing specialist, which is okay. That certainly has value in the NFL. So I think the Eagles personality wise on defense, a lot of different players and spots. And, as much as we could point to the linebackers, the safeties, the rookie Quinton Mitchell at nickel, Jordan Davis, buddy, the time is now. They need him to step up and be a dominant force next to Jalen Carter. So both these teams, really interesting storylines, both sides of the ball.
The amount of Georgia defenders in this game has got to be almost record breaking. I think it's 10. I want to say it's 9 or 10 Georgia defenders in this game, which is kind of crazy when you look at it. But my nerve, I didn't put in nervous, so I put more curious. Mekhi Becton was mine as well. It's just, what does he look like at right guard for this team? Obviously, Jurgens is interesting as well. So that was definitely there's not a lot of like looking at their roster, a ton that makes me nervous about the Eagles, meaning like from what they should be concerned about. I think there's a lot that could make Packers fans nervous, but not a lot of holes on their depth chart. But Mekhi Becton at right guard is definitely one that's more intriguing than anything else. So let me ask you this. As you're thinking about it right now, Packers-Eagles game is over, regardless of what the score is, regardless of what happens. Who are maybe some of the names, or what are you most excited to go to the tape on Saturday morning and throw it on and be like, I cannot wait to see what this looks like?
Personnel-wise, that right guard spot, both teams, Mekhi Becton, like we just set up, and is Sean Ryan the starting right guard for the Packers on Friday night, Andy? Is that your thumbs up, you think?
I think so. I know today in practice, it sounded like he was warming up at right as the starting right guard again. I asked Matt a couple weeks ago of like, hey, could this be one of those situations where you have a rotation like you did with Runyon and Sean Ryan last year? And he kind of gave a wry smile and was like, I like the way you're thinking. And I don't know if it happens this week. But because of that Jalen Carter and the Eagles defensive line. So the sort of storyline here is Sean Ryan started out as the starting right guard, and then it looked like Jordan Morgan had passed him by. Like Jordan was going to be the starter at right guard. Then Morgan got injured for about 2.5 weeks, somewhere in there. And actually during that time, Ryan played very, very well and sort of earned that spot back. And I think just Jordan, rookie, first time at right guard, they wanted to kind of take it slow with him. And he just got back into team drills maybe like a week and a half ago. So it feels like Sean Ryan's going to be the immediate starter. And then again, whether it's this week or probably in the very near future, I think we start seeing a little bit of a rotation there. They did the same thing with Elton as a left guard when he was a rookie. They started out with Lane Taylor and him rotating a little bit. So I think we're going to see that. And then I think over time, it ends up probably that Jordan takes it over. But by that time, injuries may play a part, and who knows who has to play where.
All right, so we won't say player-wise, we'll say positionally. Whoever shows up at right guard for either team, and they're going to be facing the Kenny Clarks and Jalen Carters, and they're going to have their hands full, as most interior do from a week to week. This league just has freak shows on defensive tackle. So player-wise, positionally, that right guard spot. But schematically, situationally, third down defense. I want to see what Vic Fangio has for the Eagles. I want to see Hafley's new pressure schemes. You're going to see a lot of man coverage, some exotic pressures out there. And then third down, just in general, Andy, you can let the edge rushers rush. You get to see freak shows like Gary and Huff just attack. You get to watch the man cover guys cover, which is a pleasure to watch Darius Slay and Jair Alexander. We're going to see Quinyon Mitchell out there in the slot, maybe a little outside as well. He's a freak show first-round pick. Can watch these explosive defensive tackles just get upfield and attack. So third down in particular, lets the best players do what they do best out there. So I love third down in general, and then that right guard spot. So I was about to say Monday morning, but Saturday morning as we're watching film on Friday, those are the two I'm going to be hunting up early.
Yeah, I think so too. I had Jeff Hafley's defense down, just like what does it look like in general, and we'll get a little bit more of a flavor for what this kind of feels like after week one. But to your point, as you were kind of going through that, what I want to see, especially from Green Bay side of things, and this is maybe more of just like an in-game thing, is can Green Bay get in those third and long situations on defense? Because even in the Joe Barry era, a lot of those third and long situations, they were really, really good in. Just they couldn't get there. It was a lot of third and shorts, or just they didn't even get to third downs, and teams would be converting on first and second down. So I want to see them eat their vegetables a little bit more on early downs, get into those third and longs, and then see what, again, these pass rushers and what Jeff Hafley can cook up, and what these corners can do out there. So that's what I'm very intrigued by as we kind of go through this game. We mentioned kind of all three of these already, but I just wanted to see if you had maybe any additional thoughts. I know you had a tweet earlier this offseason about LVN. We'll start there because we haven't talked about him too much yet. LVN, I think you and I are both in lockstep where we know what we're going to get in the fact that he is a freak athlete and he's going to give you 110% effort on pretty much every single play. And I think you tweeted something to the extent of, when he gets matched up on a tight end, or if there's a little bit more time in the pocket, those are the, situations where he's going to eat. But it still feels like he's maybe lacking a little bit from a pass rush plan. What did you see kind of in the preseason? What's kind of the next step for LVN in his development?
Well, I do. It's just my quick little touch in on his progress, his development. I kind of weigh my expectations. And when you're a first round pick, the sky is the limit. You want them to be superstars, Hall of Famers, all pro. That's the standard. That's the expectation. You really take somebody in the first round with just saying, well, I hope this guy's on a roster for the next 8 years.
Right.
You hope he embodies the most dominant players across the league. And when other players go in that ballpark or in similar ballparks in previous drafts, that's the comparative analysis you kind of walk into players with. You want him to be Aiden Hutchinson. He got taken in the top 15. You want him to be that type of player. And that's where a lot of these draft expectations get so skewed, because the guys that immediately dominate versus the guys that are kind of slow going. Yeah. And I'm more than okay with the slow going. But not every player is a superstar. This league is loaded with C and B level players, and that is okay. You can play for 10, 12, 15 years being a C and B level player.
Yep.
That's okay. And that may be what Van Der Esch is. I just haven't seen that strong jump in development into that dominant force based on the comparative analysis of where he was drafted and the others in that similar spot. Now, there are other players in that exact conversation. You know, the Bengals and Miles Murphy, you know, the same type of thing. He just got hurt, unfortunately, but guys that were strong, explosive, just a little bit raw with technique and just being a great pass rush plan rusher and things like that. So this is very normal as far as being a little bit underwhelmed with the development of edge rushers. And that's okay. I was just kind of also giving the caveat, he can be a productive force out there still. He can bully tight ends. He's going to play with his hair on fire and chase the ball from the backside and play out to the sideline. He's going to be a good run defender. He's a good athlete. He's going to work in well with slants, twists, games, things like that. So I think he's going to fall into production. But is his level of play where I want it to be in comparison with the other top edge rushers? No. But that's also okay. So it's just kind of weighing where he is and citing, I hope he can kind of still climb and grow. And if he is just where he is, that's okay too. And there's a place to evaluate that. And there's a place for that on this team.
And I think in Green Bay, to some extent, we've kind of seen those 3 tiers of edge rushers as of late. You know, your top tier is your Clay Matthews, defensive player of the year candidate. Then you have Rashawn Gary, who's just a fantastic edge rusher, but hasn't quite cleared that bar of all pro or defensive player of the year type player. And then there's the Nick Perry, who is a solid rotational piece who can be helpful to you. If he has to be your number 1 edge rusher, you're probably in trouble, but can he be one of your top maybe 2, 3 guys that are on your team and rotating in and getting pressures and sacks? Yeah, probably. So where in that threshold he falls in is that story is to be told. But I think I'm kind of more he's kind of leaning towards a little bit more of the Nick Perry. Hopefully he can get to that at least Rashawn.
And that's a great comparison out there. And if you just look at that class last year, I mean, the drug of it all is Will Anderson.
Yeah.
You know, you keep circling back. Well, look how he played. But then you can quickly point to Tyree Wilson's disastrous season, or, you know, Will McDonald not getting on the field much for the Jets, or, you know, anybody in between there in a similar type of vein. Miles Murphy, like I had mentioned with the Bengals, who was a first-round pick as well, who didn't have the season they had expected and really needed him this year. Fortunately, just tore his ACL, a few weeks ago. So all these developmental curves are a little bit different, but it's that drug of that guy that just made it look great right away. You just point to that. You want that, and you want it now. And that's just not realistic. So you hope you get that, but it really isn't realistic. And if he never turns into that, that's okay too. You can be a B-level player, C-level, like you had mentioned, a Nick Perry, and be a damn good pro and a productive pro and a needed pro on the roster.
Yeah, very much so. Let's not talk about Tyree Wilson. That's going to go down as one of my biggest draft misses ever, I think. So we don't need to talk about him. But no, that was one I definitely thought was going to work out, and it very clearly is not so far. Just the 2 other ones. Again, we brought these up, so we don't need to go too much more into detail. But if you had anything to add, 2 other just kind of topics of interest: Jeff Hafley's defense, maybe anything else that you're expecting in this first game, and then anything from Devontae Wyatt. You kind of mentioned it earlier that this defense could potentially unlock him as more of a gap penetrating, 3 technique who can get into the backfield and cause chaos. Anything else on either of those 2 topics?
No, I think you kind of hit it. Wyatt, I really think maybe his primary skill set is just being a pass rushing penetrator, or a guy that just wants to fly upfield in early downs and let the linebackers go clean up the chaos that he caused. And that's really how he played at Georgia. So Kenny Clark has been talking about this a little bit on some podcasts. Chris Long, I would implore people to go watch, which is great, talking about formerly having just hold the line of scrimmage versus now penetrating up the field. I thought it was just a great kind of visual for fans in the scheme change there. But I think Wyatt's going to be a much better player because of this. And like you had mentioned with Hafley's scheme, I think we're just going to see a lot more man coverage out there. Yeah. So I think you're going to see guys just having to hang on to their luggage out there, know their assignment. But this league knows man coverage is popular out there. It's popular on 3rd down. There's going to be motion. There's going to be picks, rubs, all those different concepts to try to shake free those guys trying to keep their eyes on the luggage out there. So once you have an identity defensively, you also know how you're going to be attacked.
Yep.
So with this new scheme, it may be 3-4 weeks till you start understanding, oh, we're going to get a lot more man beating concepts against them and things like that. So finding out who your identity is can then be that kind of self-assessment to know, oh, they're going to come at us this way on third and medium or third and long. So I think that kind of developmental curve with the defense will be fun to watch.
I think so too. And talk about a fun first round or first week matchup for a new man defense. Just AJ Brown, new Jahan Dotson, probably seeing some slot time, and then Devontae Smith. Like, good luck. Let's see what you guys got in the first week playing a little bit more man coverage against a wide receiver group like that. But to be fair, wide receiver groups like that are very prevalent. Or at least you're going to match up with one or two of those guys pretty much every week in the.
I'm pretty sure
NFL.
Smith and Brown are tops in the NFL with man coverage yards over the past 2-3 seasons. So not many teams try to put man coverage corners on them. If you do, buyer beware out there, because Smitty is shifty and AJ Brown is a beast at 230 pounds out there. So pick your poison between those two.
Yeah, not an easy matchup. I think we're going to see a lot of Eric Stokes targets, because I think Jair maybe gets one of those matchups, obviously, and you'd maybe feel a little bit better of that from a Packers standpoint. But I think we could see Stokes and Nixon targeted early and often in this one, and I'm very intrigued to see how they hold up. All right, speaking of which, any key matchups that you're going to kind of be watching that you think could ultimately, sort of shape this game as we go into it?
Yeah, I think Jaden Reed in his slot duties, which he's kind of carved out that role, and he's going to see a lot of rookie Quinton Mitchell. So I'm excited for that high-level matchup. Reed in his second year, Mitchell being a first-round pick, just trying to find the play time opposite Darius Slay and slide into the slot as well. But with that, there's all these different weapons you could put in the slot. So for both teams, you're going to see a variety of weapons. You're going to see Reed in the slot. You're going to see Musgrave in the slot. You may see Josh Jacobs motioned out to the slot at times as well. So I think the variety of personnel you're going to see in the slot for both teams. The Eagles do the same thing. Dallas Goedert, you're going to see Devontae Smith in the slot. You'll see AJ Brown in the slot, Jahan Dotson in the slot. They may go and put Kenneth Gainwell in the slot, excuse me, or Saquon Barkley in the slot. So I think that slot position across the league, like we had talked about in the past, is just a hybrid of skill sets and body types. But they put the same nickel out there, and he has to cover all these different guys. Oh yeah, be a blitzer, be in run support. It's tough business out there. So, and a rookie to do it. I was so impressed with like a Brian Branch in Detroit last year, holding down the nickel spot. I want to see if Quinton Mitchell can pick it right up. So slot coverage against the Packers and Eagles offense is going to be interesting to watch.
I have quoted you on that conversation many times this offseason about how that slot position is so insanely hard, and the different flavors of players that you get at that spot, and what you're asked to do as a run defender, a blitzer, a cover guy against all shapes and sizes. Just good luck. And I think my hope from a Green Bay side of things is that we see Keyshawn Nixon, but we also see some Javon Bullard. We might even see some Jair Alexander. I think this is going to be a little bit more mix and match under Jeff Hafley than maybe it was in Joe Barry. And I think that can be a very good thing for this defense.
Yeah, agreed. And I think Jair is going to really welcome the change, and you're going to see him playing much more confident, faster, more enthusiastic. We know his kind of wet blanket attitude of the last regime. So I just think from his kind of personality and character and that infectious person he can be on the field, I think the best form of Jair is ahead this season. Although his contract did just get trumped by Patrick Surtain. So we'll see if maybe he's got something to prove out there.
And maybe he's looked one of the best versions of Jair that I've seen in camp so far. So I think he is remotivated and re-energized by this defense. And I don't think he's the only one either. So hopefully that carries over into the game. Last but not least, before we get you out of here, what's just your general expectations for the Packers going into this year after I think, fairly successful year last year that maybe some people didn't see coming? They have obviously more expectations this year, but how do you see it?
It's such a tough question. I think the world of Dan Campbell and the Detroit Lions. I have a really tough time putting many teams over them in the pecking order or power rankings. Maybe the Chiefs, maybe the Niners. The Packers are kind of lockstep, maybe a smidge behind. So I still like Detroit to win the division. But you're not going to look at a team like the Packers and the way they finished last year and say they're not going to make the playoffs. Right. So by default, let's peg them into a wild card. But this division is heating up. I mean, the Chicago Bears look really good. I know they have the Hard Knocks kind of flair and the number one overall pick flair, but that team looks really good, Andy. I know they were, that kind of undefeated in the preseason is always a bit of a fool's gold, but I'm kind of buying what they're selling out there, whether it's Eberflus in the future or not. I think they really got their quarterback, which is going to make life a little bit difficult for these teams in the North, like the Packers, the Vikings, the Lions, and the rest of the NFC. So my expectations for the Packers, certainly a playoff berth, a playoff appearance. I would hope that's a division win, but it may be a wild card. And then you just got to get into the tournament, just get into the dance like they had last year, which I don't think anybody expected them. Next thing you know, you knock off the Cowboys in Dallas. You probably should have won a game in San Francisco, and anyone could beat anybody. So get yourself into the dance, and then we'll see who the big boys are in this league and who can define their legacy, as Jordan Love has quite the blank notebook ahead. So I'm excited to see what other chapters he could tell us.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think Detroit is so hard, especially from a regular season standpoint over a 17-game schedule. Detroit is just so solid all the way around that it just feels like not only could they potentially win the North, I think they could easily, maybe not easily, but they could win the NFC and be that number one seed overall just because of how steady they are and the talent that they have. And I think just to your almost what you were saying, just maybe a hair more mature of a team from an experience standpoint than where Green Bay is right now. But I think those have the ability to be two really fun games this season, and maybe even matching up towards the end of the playoffs to see who goes and plays in that championship game come February. Ben, amazing stuff as always. Thank you so much for taking the time. Always appreciate it. Anything you want to plug on the way out, or anything else you want to add?
No, not particularly. I have a busy season ahead. Thursday Night Football, CBS on Sundays, double dip once again. I'll be off to Cincinnati this weekend for Jacoby Brissett against Joe Burrow. A lot of people thinking these Bengals are hot. Joe Burrow on the cusp of an MVP season. So I'm excited for the travel and just to get this season rolling. I unfortunately left my role with the Eagles. So after 10 seasons, I am saying goodbye, but it was a great run out there. And I'm all systems ahead and all systems go for this 2024 season. Quickly noticing I didn't center myself between the two helmets that I had, Packers and Eagles. So that's a lapse on me. But hey, we'll clean it up. We'll watch the tape, Andy, and we'll get better.
It's week one for everyone. So
exactly.
Like you said, we'll watch the tape, we'll clean it up. But Ben, always appreciate it. You're the absolute best. I'm sure we'll have you on a couple times again this season, but enjoy the season. I know you're going to work your ass off per usual, but try to have some downtime and enjoy it as much as you can.
Thanks, Andy.
That does it for us. But until next time, and as always, go Pack, go.